GameRanx here to give you the top 10 worst Star Wars games of all time. There are so many Star Wars games with even more hits than the movies have, but there are definitely some duds. So let's get into it, starting off with number 10. Star Wars Yoda Stories is a game that you've probably never heard of, and that's for good reason. It's awful.
Maybe this time around they were trying to recapture the magic from the previous LucasArts point-and-click adventure games like Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, but it didn't really work out so well.
You played as Luke during The Empire Strikes Back, and you were given some boring, dumb fetch quests where you walk across the map, and the graphics were so bad that it was almost hard to even figure out what you were doing. The movements never registered correctly, and enemies and parts of the level would randomly blink and disappear. While it was a PC game when PC games were pretty competent, this thing looked almost like an Atari game. Not to mention the fact that you had to hear the same digitized Star Wars music over and over and over again, and you couldn't turn it off. If that's not complete madness, I don't know what is. And at number 9, we have Star Wars Demolition. Star Wars Demolition was a game built off the Vigilante 8 engine. Vigilante 8, for those of you who don't know, was a car combat game similar to Twisted Metal. So basically, this was a Star Wars Twisted Metal car combat game. You got to play as a variety of different Star Wars vehicles, from anything from a Trade Federation tank to a regular land speeder or an AT-ST. And in concept, it sounds like a pretty awesome idea, and as a kid, I'll admit, I kind of thought this game was pretty cool. But oh my god, playing it again, it does not hold up, and it was actually pretty broken. There was a lot of clipping, awful hit detection, and a lot of times you'd just fall through the geometry, you'd fall through the floor of the game. It's not the worst, but it's really half-baked, and really it's just the missed potential. This game could have been so awesome. And speaking of missed potential, at number 8, we have Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the game. Now, this is maybe on the list, maybe because Episode 1, the movie, just was not that good, but this was just a bad game. During The Phantom Menace, we got a lot of Star Wars games, and this is definitely one of the worst ones. It was known for being really buggy, generally craptastic, and really repetitive. In The Phantom Menace, you get to play as Obi-Wan, everyone's favorite Qui-Gon Jinn, Queen Amidala, or Captain Panaka. Yeah, oh boy. And you pretty much run around, use a lightsaber to cut everything, or use a blaster to shoot everything. It was just really boring and forgettable. It looked like butt, and especially when Jedi Power Battles was out, that game blew this one away. And at number 7, we have Super Star Wars, a Super Nintendo Star Wars game that was really, really awful. Maybe it's just me, because they recently ported this over the PlayStation 4, and I don't understand why, because even as a kid, I really didn't like this game. Mostly because maybe it's just impossible. Now, some of you are probably gonna say, well, just get good at it, but I hated this game as a kid just because it was completely pointless. You ran around as Luke and did absolutely nothing but shoot shit, and there was no save or checkpoint system at all. It was completely madness. Out on the playground, we didn't know too many kids that actually could get past the first level. There was always that one kid that could, though, and we all thought he was really awesome. We also thought he was somehow cheating. It was just a really detached game from Star Wars and made a lot of really weird decisions with the source material. And at number 6, we have Force Commander. This was a PC RTS style game that was completely boring because it was almost just static, clunky, and unintuitive. The game has a semi-3D landscape that doesn't really good, and you manage troops, and you basically conduct the Battle of Hoth. The interface was just so awful and clunky and small and difficult to read, you couldn't figure out how to really even do anything. And then when you did, all the units were just so poorly balanced that it just was practically unplayable. And another really bad thing is that there's new music in this game. They didn't use a lot of Star Wars music, they made their own, and it was bad. But the worst part about this game is that there was actually a lot of potential. A cool classic style Star Wars RTS with troop and battle management could have been really cool, and later on that was realized. But Force Commander was definitely just a big wet flop. And at number 5, we have The Force Unleashed 2. Now, say what you want about the original Force Unleashed, it's pretty divisive in the gaming community, but at least it set out to try and tell a story in between the Star Wars movies and actually fit in pretty well, and was really cool and imaginative. That being said, Force Unleashed 2 really kind of just played like fan fiction. The story was awful, it dragged the main character back in after a death, and it just made no sense, and playing it sucked. It was even more repetitive than the first game. By the end of the first game, I had killed enough Rancors that I never wanted to see one again, and then Force Unleashed 2 kicks it off right again with killing more Rancors. But this time around, you don't want to put up with any of it and get through it to see the story because the story is bullshit. And at number 4, we have Star Wars Obi-Wan. Star Wars Obi-Wan was a game that had a tumultuous development cycle and eventually ended up as an Xbox exclusive. It was kind of exciting. You got to play as the badass Obi-Wan from Episode 1, and visually the game looked kind of cool. You just ran around with a lightsaber and did cool shit. But unfortunately, the game controlled so bad and was so clumsy, it made playing through this already shallow game just really a big big chore. Dodging around and flipping around was totally useless when you could have easily been able to strafe or something. That would have been nice. But I remember multiple times just throwing the controller down in frustration and walking away from this game. Along with the controls that were bad, the production values were craptastic, and there really wasn't much meat to this game here. There was rumor that there was going to be all sorts of cool multiplayer modes, and none of that really panned out. And especially for me, maybe because I went into this game hoping for another Jedi Outcast game, I was sorely disappointed with Star Wars Obi-Wan. And at number 3, we have a game that is very divisive here in the office, Star Wars Masters of Teras-Kasi. This was a Star Wars fighting game that, I'm gonna be honest, I thought was totally awesome. I had an emulation running of it a few years back and I realized that it wasn't so awesome. But back in the day, I just thought the idea of playing as your favorite Star Wars characters in a fighting game was totally awesome and I couldn't get enough of it. But now looking back, it really is just kind of a half-baked fighting game. There wasn't really much combos. There was juggling in the game, but it was really impossible to do, and like I said, the combos were so short and half-baked that you couldn't really get anything going, and the game looked kind of like complete butt. What was cool about it was that it did embrace some of the expanded universe stuff, like you could play as Mara Jade Skywalker, which is someone who is soon to be forgotten in Star Wars lore. But overall, this game is on the list because it's just some missed potential. Like Star Wars Demolition, the idea could have been really cool, but it was just poorly executed. And still to this day, I weep tears for how awesome Masters of Teras-Kasi could have been. So that's why it's on our list. And at number 2, we have Star Wars Super Bombad Racing, which is a game that I freaking hate. This was number 1, a kart racer, and number 2, a kart racer based solely on the Phantom Menace. Yeah, what more could be better than that? The game wasn't necessarily totally broken or anything, but it was just so offensively stupid to Star Wars fans that none of us really wanted anything to do with it. You flew around in little cartoon carts with big-headed baby-like characters, and it really just made all of us shake our heads in shame. That being said, I will say that the main menu had a really dope rendition of the Imperial March, but that's besides the point. And at number 1, we have Kinect Star Wars, another game that is just completely missed potential that just ended up being embarrassing. Number 1, the Kinect in the first place didn't work very well and wasn't as cool as the game was advertised. You couldn't just run around willy-nilly and be an awesome Jedi and make all your dreams come true like the game was advertised. It really only worked 50% at a time, and what you did play through was totally just repetitive, boring, vague, generic Star Wars shit. But really the worst sin that this game committed, and the reason why it's number 1 on this list, is the dancing stuff. Oh god, the dancing stuff. Did you guys remember seeing this? It still haunts my dreams. I still have like Force Ghost nightmares just thinking about this. Just the dancing Star Wars characters and then the rendition of the Han Solo song. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. Oh god, I don't want to watch anymore. Take it away. So guys, those were 10 of the worst Star Wars games. There are so many Star Wars games out there, and depending on your opinion of some of these games, this list could be a little longer. So we want to know in the comments, what Star Wars games do you not enjoy? Or which games do you think really just fell short of their potential? Is there a Star Wars game that everybody hates that you actually kind of love? Let us know anything like that down in the comments. We want to talk about it. If you did have a good time and maybe you love Star Wars and you love us, click the like button because that helps us out a lot. And if this is your first time around here, you should subscribe because we put out videos every single day. But guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.